The rule of thumb in video games is that if somebody comes up with a unique, groundbreaking feature or mechanic that's lovingly embraced by critics, that idea is going to be lifted and used in countless other titles from a wide variety of genres. Generally, this isn't a bad thing. Sharing ideas and concepts is far better for the growth of the gaming industry than insisting that because you invented a feature, it's merely yours to use. And really the only thing that prevents developers from adopting other games as creative features is the law, because as the history of gaming has proven, protective devs sure love filing patents. Granted, many patents are invalidated in court, but for most developers, the patent will serve as an effective deterrent from even trying to use another game's idea, because it just isn't worth the time and effort to litigate the matter. And so if you wondered why these 9 incredible video game features haven't really been used elsewhere, here's what went down. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 9 amazing video game features you'll never see in anything else. Number 9. The Nemesis System. Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. What separates Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor from being just another passable open-world game based on a name IP is its ingenious Nemesis system, which keeps persistent track of the Uruk hierarchy throughout your adventure. Rather than all enemies simply being generic anonymous foes, many of them have names, and those that either kill the player or survive an encounter with them will be promoted and in turn grow stronger. Better yet, in the event you're killed, your online friends will even be invited to take down the Uruk responsible on your behalf. Nemesis was by far the most acclaimed aspect of the game, and so unsurprisingly returned for 2017's sequel Shadow of War. Many began to question, however, why the evidently brilliant mechanic hadn't appeared in other games. For though the more recent Assassin's Creed games introduced the similar Order of the Ancients feature, it wasn't nearly as intricate. For many devs, the initial answer seemed to be that the Nemesis system was simply too challenging and time-consuming to implement relative to the rewards it reaped. Though earlier this year, Warner Bros. Confirmed their claim on the mechanic by having their formal patent confirmed. The publisher had been trying to patent Nemesis since March 2015, which offers the most likely answer for other developers steering clear. Sadly, with Shadow of War posting disappointing sales and nary a word of a follow-up in the 4+ years since, it's looking incredibly likely that the Nemesis system is going to die a shockingly premature death. Number 8. Loading screen minigames. Any Namco game. The old-timer example of a killer video game feature gated off from the rest of the industry due to a patent is Namco's brilliant idea to place minigames within loading screens to, in the patent's own words, prevent, quote, unnecessary wastage of time. The patent was first filed in 1994 for the console release of Ridge Racer, where players were able to play a version of Namco's shooter Galaxian during the game's loading screen. It's such a terrific idea to stave off player boredom while loading, and yet despite the obvious appeal the concept had to basically every developer out there, Namco's filing deterred others from ever implementing such a mechanic. Games like FIFA and Bayonetta have circumvented the patent by including fleeting interactive distractions during the loading process, but the lack of truly substantial attention-stealing minigames is entirely Namco's doing. The patent finally expired in 2015, but ironically, video game loading times had decreased enough by this point that minigames didn't seem much of a priority for developers. With SSDs surging in popularity in both PC and console gaming over the last few years, the necessity for distractions during loading screens has basically gone away completely, meaning there's little likelihood we'll ever actually need to see this one again. Number 7. Play of the game. Overwatch. The massively successful multiplayer FPS Overwatch touts the play of the game feature, where at each game's conclusion, the most outstanding game-changing play of the match is replayed for all combatants from the perspective of the player in question. While other major games like Call of Duty have implemented adjacent mechanics over the years, Overwatch's play of the game is driven by a more specific and involved algorithm, which scans the entirety of the match data to recognize the player who performed the most significant actions within a brief window of time. Blizzard clearly knew they were onto something hot here, as they filed the patent back in 2016, just a few months after after the game's release. Though the patent wasn't officially granted until near the end of 2019, by planting their flag so early, they ensured other developers wouldn't risk incurring Blizzard's legal wrath and stayed well away. The patent remains valid until 2037, by which time Overwatch 2 will probably finally be out. Number 6. The Mass Collecting Ball, Katamari Damacy. The Katamari franchise is all about one elegantly simple idea: rolling the titular magical ultra adhesive ball around and collecting as many objects as humanly possible, until the Katamari becomes big enough to become a star. Yep, that's such a brilliantly singular idea that you can't really blame Namco for wanting to patent it, unlike that whole loading screen minigame debacle. The filing also covers the more specific technical aspects of how objects attach to the Katamari, and it all maintains traction. The patent was filed in September 2003, a few months before the game's release, and it currently isn't set to expire until 2026, protecting the game's unique gameplay conceit from being co-opted by other developers. Given that the franchise has basically averaged a new game release every year, a total of 18 since 2004, you can reasonably expect that patent to get renewed 5 years from now. Number 5. The Dialogue Wheel, Mass Effect. The idea that anyone could hold onto the patent on a dialogue interface of all things might seem absolutely ridiculous at first, but it makes a little more sense when you think about Mass Effect's outside-the-box approach to the feature. Rather than present the dialogue options in the usual list form, Mass Effect offers them up in a wheel, where each segment corresponds to a given character attribute. For example, top right is the selfless paragon, middle right is diplomatic and neutral, and bottom right is the hostile renegade. Your choices, of course, have a knock-on effect on how other characters regard you, and it's ultimately the granularity of the wheel's choices that makes it unique. While it has actually appeared in a few other BioWare games, the company's 2006 patent filing will prevent it from being freely replicated outside of the company. The patent's also good until 2029, by which time the Mass Effect franchise will hopefully be back on firm footing. Otherwise, at least we have Dragon Age. Hopefully. Number 4. Sanity Effects, Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem. 2002 cult classic horror game Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem may have been a commercial dud upon release, but it was widely lauded by critics for its groundbreaking sanity effects mechanic. If the player character's sanity slipped sufficiently by coming into regular contact with enemies, they would be presented with visual and auditory hallucinations intended to trick them. These hallucinations were incredibly advanced and convincing for their era, ranging from pretending to adjust the volume on your TV, reset the console, or delete your game save, to far more disturbing tricks like faking the protagonist's death. Nintendo filed a patent for the sanity effects way back in February of 2000, almost 2.5 years before the game's release, and though it was set to expire recently, the patent was renewed at the last minute. While there have been games that have implemented similar ideas, like Amnesia: The Dark Descent, they generally employ enough variation on the precise mechanics of the sanity meter to avoid invoking the ire of Nintendo's legal team. Number 3. Complex mouse aim for aircrafts, War Thunder. Multiplayer vehicular combat game War Thunder has received strong acclaim for its refined air, land, and sea combat, though there's one major aspect that sticks out to flight enthusiasts: the uncommon nuance to the game's mouse aim controls for planes. If you wondered why most modern games featuring aircraft primarily require PC players to use their keyboard or a controller, it's because back in 2012, War Thunder developer Gaijin Entertainment filed a patent for their uniquely refined mouse aim mechanics and aircraft simulation model. The implementation of mouse aim required the game's flight system to understand the quote analytical aspects of aircraft behavior in a more complex way, which in the developer's own words is one of the reasons the game is so popular. When a Redditor asked why other games haven't copied War Thunder's innovative mouse aim system, Gaijin founder Anton Yudintsev replied, "Well, we invented it. It's not as simple as it looks, as implementing it requires predictor, either empirical or simulated." The current filing won't expire until 2033, so Gaijin's clearly set for a good while. Number 2. Dual reality split screen. The Medium. Bloober Team's horror game The Medium, which released earlier this year, wasn't widely met with acclaim by fans, but it did present an intriguing feature that somehow hasn't really been done before, presenting two planes of reality at the same time via split screen. The physical realm and the spirit realm were depicted simultaneously throughout the game, with players controlling the protagonist in both realms at once, a unique mechanic which Bloober Team decided to patent all the way back in 2016, almost 5 years before the game's release. The idea was originally conceived by the developers in 2012, but because consoles of the era, the 360, PS3, and Wii U, weren't powerful enough to render two scenes at once, Bloober Team effectively had to put the medium on the back burner. What's especially interesting about this patent, though, is that while the developers are clearly protective of the feature, one of the game's producers confirmed in a Reddit AMA that split-screen gameplay was ultimately an experiment, and they don't actually plan to use it again soon, if ever. Nevertheless, the patent will hold until 2036, so they've sensibly got their interests protected for the next 15 years, should they change their mind. Number 1. Toggle between classic and remastered gameplay. Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary. On Halo's 10th anniversary, Microsoft released a remake of the iconic FPS, which in addition to boasting glossy new HD visuals, also allowed players to instantly toggle between the slick new aesthetic and the classic one. It was by far the most impressive and praised feature of the remake, and so a few weeks after Halo Anniversary's release, Microsoft filed a patent protecting the concept. While you might recall that a few remakes and remasters have allowed players to swap between presentation styles, namely Grim Fandango Remastered and Diablo 2 Remastered, these games had to ensure they didn't copy Halo's precise method of achieving it. Microsoft patented the technique of having two graphical engines running simultaneously, a major technical challenge which caused significant issues during Halo Anniversary's development, as the more detailed HD geometry deviated from the blockier original environments. The development team spent a long time implementing bespoke solutions to solve this problem, and others like it. So what might seem like a frivolous patent at first makes a little more sense when you dig into it. As a result, any game that wishes to toggle between classic and new visual styles has to go about it in a simpler, less refined fashion, typically using an emulation technique for the original visual and tethering it to the shiny new gameplay, rather than having two engines running at once, or as the patent calls it, a plurality of engines. The patent expires in 2032. And that's the end of our list. Do let me know down in that comment box if you can think of any other amazing video game features you reckon are not seen in any other games. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account, where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness. Thank you.